Hello friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing a full review of Age of Ash by Daniel Abraham, which was so kindly sent to me as an electronic ARC from NetGalley and Orbit Books. So I am of course giving you a full honest review in exchange for this ARC, and hopefully this review will be able to let you know whether this is a book that is for you or not and whether this is something that you should pick up. So Age of Ash is the first book in a planned trilogy called Kithamar, and this is a secondary world urban epic fantasy that is really character focused and atmospherically driven with a very cool magic system. So I am just going to start off by reading the synopsis. So from Daniel Abraham comes a monumental epic fantasy trilogy that unfolds within the walls of a single great city over the course of one tumultuous year where every story matters and the fate of the city is woven from them all. Kithamar is a center of trade and wealth, an ancient city with a long, bloody history where countless thousands live and their stories unfold. This is Alice's. When her brother is murdered, a petty thief from the slums of Long Hill sets out to discover who killed him and why. But the more she discovers about him, the more she learns about herself, and the truths she finds are more dangerous than knives. Swept up in an intrigue as deep as the roots of Kithamar, where the secrets of the lowest born can sometimes topple thrones, the story Alice chooses will have the power to change everything. So that is the synopsis given on Goodreads for this book, and before I get into my review, I want to talk a little bit about expectations, because Daniel Abraham has become famous for his co-authoring of the Expanse series as part of the duo James S.A. Which obviously is fantastic for Mr. Abraham, and I wish him all the success because I have loved one of his other series. But I think that it's really important to point out that I've only read the first book in The Expanse. However, I do think that it's a little bit of a disservice to his current series to bill him as the author of The Expanse, because in my mind, they are just extremely different books and styles of storytelling, and what Daniel Abraham often tries to do in his solo series is a very different vibe from what The Expanse appeared to be doing. He is very small scale, character focused, emotionally focused, slower paced, slower build up, where he builds his plot up over multiple books and then ties it all together beautifully. And neither one of these things are negatives on their own, but I do think that those types of books find often different audiences from each other, and I worry that fans of The Expanse will come into this solo series of Daniel Abraham's with the wrong expectations. And I don't want the book to not fail, but get lower ratings because of that. I want people to go in with the proper expectations. So in terms of a rating, I ended up landing at 3.75 for Age of Ash, and I thought that this was a solid first entry into a series, but I also trust Daniel Abraham. So I'm going to talk about some of the strengths of this book and some of the things that could be construed as weaknesses and some of the things that I didn't like as much, and hopefully if I can give you some of both sides, then you can decide whether this is a book that you're interested in. So first of all, and something that I always love from Daniel Abraham, is his prose. I think that he has this very simple but beautiful way of writing where it is concise, but his word choice is second to none, where he is able to describe things for you while not being overly flowery or overly complex. However, he is able to make you see and feel immersed in the scene in exactly the way that he wants you to. And I have always appreciated that about his prose. However, I do know that prose and prose preferences are something that can be very personal. So while that's something that I love about his books, that is something where your mileage may vary depending on who you are as a reader. The second thing that I think is fantastic about this book is atmosphere. And this goes in hand with Daniel Abraham's prose a little bit because of how good he is at descriptions, but the atmosphere in this book is overflowing with like intensity, and it's the city, like the city of Kithamar is, in my opinion, really a character in this book, and it's the city that feels like dirty and grimy and gritty, and you can really picture it. You can picture how the different sections of the city look and feel, whether they're richer or poorer, and you can get a sense of the people that live there and the way that they think and the way that they live their lives. And it's very also focused on the changing of the seasons and what happens to the city in the changing of the seasons, the freeze and thaw of the river and things like that. So his crafting of the atmosphere in this book, it's just fantastic. So that is absolutely a strength of Age of Ash. Another thing that I thought was really well done and interesting was the exploration of grief throughout this book. And one of the reasons why I think it was so well done is because I think that it's a very real exploration of a side of grief that a lot of people don't always recognize or want to see. Because grief, of course, isn't always just someone being sad. It can also be someone acting in ways that they wouldn't normally act, or acting in ways that you don't particularly like, and you don't want them to do that even if you recognize that they're being affected by their grief, or people kind of losing themselves and not being able to ground themselves and find who they are again after losing someone. So this is a spoiler-free review, so I'm not going to go into it any farther than that, but I did think that the character arc through dealing with grief in this book was very interesting. Now, possibly my favorite aspect of this book, and certainly the most unique one, is the magic system. Or maybe not magic system, since we don't know that much about it yet, but the magic that we're introduced to. And this does not become obvious until a little bit further into the book, so I am going to attempt to be vague, but based on Daniel Abraham's other series, the Long Price Quartet, I personally believe that he excels at thinking of extremely unique ideas for magic, and this is definitely another one where that shines through for him, because it is unlike anything that I've ever read, and I do think that when this aspect was revealed was when I started getting truly invested in this book, and I do think that it was quite possibly my favorite part. So for those of you who are looking for a unique take or a unique magic, I think that this is a great option for that. But then again, like I said, it doesn't come in immediately, so there is a little bit of a wait for this to be revealed to you. Now, I next want to cover the characters, because for me, the characters in this book were a little bit of a mixed bag. However, I think that characters are still one of Daniel Abraham's strengths, and he does write some really, really interesting and deep and like complex characters in this book. It's just that for a large portion of it, we're following someone who honestly to me wasn't that interesting. So I'm wondering if this will be something that looks different looking back from further books, or whether this was just him miscalculating how interesting one of these storylines were going to be compared to what other characters were going through. But it's an interesting dynamic, because I still think that he crafted some really compelling characters in here, but he also has ones that just really aren't for me. So this is definitely another thing where your mileage may vary. However, I still think that there are enough characters in here to like be interesting and hold your interest. I also think that this started to improve even further towards the end of the book, and the end of this book was stronger for me than the beginning. And so that is going to lead me into my next point, which is pacing. I personally am a reader who does not mind things that are slowly paced at all, but they still have to have something that's interesting and some reason for the pacing to be slow so that it is still advancing the book. So for me, the beginning of this book was slow in a less engaging way. And then around the 25% mark was when it started to pick up for me. So I think that that's a little bit of a weakness of this book, and this also coincides with the magic being revealed a little bit later. So I do think that this book improves throughout. So if you're someone who is willing to stick it out a little bit farther into the book, I do think that it improves, but I don't think that the level of interest is the same throughout the book. I think that the beginning is a little bit slow in a bad way, and then after that, the pacing is still slow because that's kind of who Daniel Abraham is in the first installments of his series, but later on, the pacing speeds up a little bit and it is a lot better, in my opinion. Now, I've talked about some strengths and some weaknesses from my view of this book, but I want to talk about one more thing, which is the plot. And for me, this remains to be seen, because with the structure of this series, what we have is the same year playing out in all 3 books. And so I think that the timeline will be slightly different in each book, but we're going to follow the same main events and we're going to continue gaining more perspective on them until we have a full picture after the trilogy is done. So in my theory, the first book only revealed a portion of the plot to us, and after all was said and done, I did find it interesting, and I am excited to see what part of the plot we're shown in the second book. However, that's why for me, the plot still kind of remains a question mark, because while I found it interesting, it's heavily dependent on what the second and third book do to flesh it out and to bring it together, because we aren't getting an entirely new story like a sequel, like a trilogy would often be. We are going to rehash the same events but from different perspectives. So it's obviously going to be different character stories, but you know what I mean? I feel like I'm talking myself in circles, but that is where my trust in Daniel Abraham comes in, because I thought that his plotting in the Long Price Quartet was phenomenal, and I loved the way that he tied it all together. So I have that trust in him. And so if you read Age of Ash and you think that you like Daniel Abraham, but you're not so sure about this book, that would be my personal recommendation. If you feel so inclined and you're able to find them, I would recommend picking up the Long Price Quartet, because that is a finished series by him and it illustrates his talents magnificently. Like, that is a favorite series of all time for me, and I constantly think about it, and I would reread it right now if I didn't have so many other things that I wanted to read. So that is my personal recommendation, and I think that I have hit all of the main points that I want to, spoiler free. Please let me know what you think of this down in the comments. I hope that I haven't been too vague. I'm trying to strike a good balance between letting you know what to expect while also not letting you know what to expect, because it's spoiler free. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I really hope that this helped you decide whether Age of Ash could be a book for you. So please like this video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more content from me. I post videos every Monday and Thursday, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day and enjoy the release of Age of Ash. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!